Get on your knees, girl. Now, sir, I just need to explain. Did I ask you to talk? The officer's voice was sharp, cutting through the humid air. Kneel, dogs kneel, you kneel. Please, I haven't done anything wrong. Years on this badge. I decide what's wrong, you? You're nothing. Just another thug in a nice car you probably can't afford. The asphalt burned through her pants, scorching her knees. Her hands were zip-tied so tightly, her fingers went numb. A young boy watched from the sidewalk, his small voice trembling. Mommy! Why is that lady on the ground? The officer leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. Maybe this will teach you to respect authority. People like you never learn. No one said a word. No one stepped forward. One woman alone on her knees in the summer heat. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply looked straight ahead and remembered everything. But what Officer Vance Prescott didn't know, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that before long he would be the one begging and she would be the one deciding his fate. In the courtroom, Officer Vance Prescott walked to the witness stand like a man who owned the room. His dress uniform was immaculate, every button polished, every crease sharp. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. His attorney, a polished man named Richard Brennan, stood with a reassuring smile. Officer Prescott, please describe what happened on that afternoon. Prescott nodded, his voice steady and rehearsed. I was conducting routine patrol in the area when I observed a vehicle with heavily tinted windows. Upon closer inspection, I noticed the registration tag appeared to be expired. I initiated a standard traffic stop, approached the vehicle, and identified myself as a police officer. And what happened next? Prescott's jaw tightened slightly. The driver immediately became verbally combative, refused to provide identification, and started making erratic movements toward the glove compartment. A murmur rippled through the gallery. I repeatedly instructed the subject to keep her hands visible. She refused to comply. At that point, for my own safety and the safety of the public, I asked her to exit the vehicle. And did she comply? Reluctantly. Prescott shook his head slowly, as if recalling a difficult memory. She continued to argue, raised her voice, made threatening gestures. Attorney Brennan nodded sympathetically. What did you do then? I executed a standard compliance procedure. I instructed her to kneel on the ground while I secured the scene. Backup arrived shortly after. He looked directly at the jury, his eyes wide and earnest. Everything I did was by the book. I followed protocol to the letter. My body camera was rolling the entire time. I have nothing to hide. From her seat at the plaintiff's table, Dr. Lena Brooks watched him without expression. Her hands rested calmly on the table. Her breathing was slow and measured. If Prescott's lies bothered her, she didn't show it. Attorney Brennan continued building his narrative. Officer Prescott, in your years of service, have you ever been disciplined for misconduct? No, sir. Never. Any complaints filed against you? Prescott hesitated for just a fraction of a second. There have been a few complaints over the years, all unfounded, all dismissed. And on that day, did you use any racial slurs or inappropriate language toward the plaintiff? Absolutely not. Prescott's voice was firm. I treated her the same way I would treat anyone who refused to comply with a lawful order. Race had nothing to do with it. He turned toward Dr. Brooks, and for the first time a hint of smugness crept into his expression. I don't see color when I'm doing my job. I see compliance or non-compliance. That's it. Several people in the gallery nodded. An older woman in the third row whispered to her husband, "He seems so professional." Attorney Brennan smiled. "No further questions at this time, Your Honor." The judge, a stern woman named Judge Carolyn Hayes, turned to the plaintiff's table. "Mr. Lang, your witness." Victor Lang, Dr. Brooks' attorney, rose slowly. He was sharp-eyed behind wire-rimmed glasses. He approached the witness stand with a yellow legal pad in his hand. "Officer Prescott," he began, his tone almost casual, "you mentioned you've received complaints over the years. How many exactly? Prescott shifted in his seat. I don't have the exact number. Would it surprise you to learn that our research found a significant number of formal complaints filed against you over recent years? The courtroom stirred. Prescott's attorney half rose from his seat but didn't object. Prescott's smile faltered. Complaints don't mean anything. Anyone can file a complaint. A significant number, Lang repeated slowly. And how many resulted in disciplinary action? None, because they were all unfounded. We'll return to that. Lang made a note on his pad. Now, you testified that Dr. Brooks was verbally combative. Can you give us a specific example of what she said? Prescott paused. She was arguing, asking questions, refusing to follow instructions. Asking questions is combative when you're in a tense situation? What questions did she ask, officer? Another pause, longer this time. She asked why I pulled her over, asked if she was being detained or arrested. Lang raised an eyebrow. So she asked for clarification about her legal status, and you interpreted that as combative. It was the way she said it. I see. Lang glanced at his notes. You also mentioned she made erratic movements toward the glove compartment, but you had your body camera running, correct? Yes. And in that footage, which we've reviewed extensively, Dr. Brooks clearly states, and I quote, Officer, I'm going to reach for my registration in the glove compartment. Is that okay? Does that match your recollection? Prescott's face reddened slightly. I don't recall her exact words. You don't recall, but the camera does. Lang let the statement hang in the air. Officer Prescott, you used the phrase compliance procedure to describe forcing Dr. Brooks to kneel on the hot asphalt. Is that the official term? It's a standard technique for maintaining control of a scene. How many times have you used this compliance procedure in recent years? I'd have to check my records. We checked for you. Dozens of times. The same number as your complaints. Interesting coincidence, don't you think? Brennan finally stood. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness. I'll rephrase. Lang stepped closer to Prescott. Of those dozens of uses of your compliance procedure, how many resulted in actual arrests? Prescott swallowed. I don't have that number off the top of my head. Less than a quarter. Lang turned to face the jury. That means most of the people were forced to their knees, humiliated in public, and then released without any charges. He turned back to Prescott. What did those people have in common, officer? I don't understand the question. Let me be clearer. Of the people you forced to kneel, most were black or Hispanic in a district that is majority white. Lang paused. Can you explain that statistical anomaly? Prescott's hand moved to his collar, loosening it slightly. I don't choose who I pull over based on race. I respond to suspicious behavior. Suspicious behavior? Lang repeated. Like driving with tinted windows. Like asking questions about your legal rights. Objection. Brennan's voice was sharp, argumentative. Sustained. Judge Hayes looked at Lang. Move on, counselor. Lang nodded, but he wasn't finished. He picked up a sheet of paper from his table. One final question for now, Officer Prescott. During the incident with Dr. Brooks, your partner, Officer Sophia Ramirez, arrived as backup, correct? Yes. And on your body camera audio, we hear her say, and I quote, Vance, maybe we should just, before you cut her off. What was she about to suggest? Prescott's eye twitched. I don't remember. You don't remember a lot of things. Lang gathered his notes. That's all for now, Your Honor, but we'll have more questions for Officer Prescott later. As Lang returned to his seat, Prescott exhaled slowly. His composure cracked but not broken. He still believed he would win. After all, he always had before. The plaintiff may call her next witness. Victor Lang stood. Your Honor, we call Dr. Lena Brooks to the stand. The courtroom shifted as she rose from the plaintiff's table. She moved with quiet deliberation. No rushing, no hesitation. Her navy blue suit was simple but elegant. No jewelry except a thin gold watch. Her natural hair was pulled back neatly. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and took her seat in the witness stand. For a brief moment, her eyes swept across the courtroom, past the jury, past the gallery filled with reporters and curious onlookers, past Officer Vance Prescott, who sat with his arms crossed, a faint smirk still lingering on his face. Then her gaze settled on her briefcase, still resting beside her empty chair at the plaintiff's table, the worn leather, the faded government seal. She looked away. Victor Lang approached with a gentle smile. "Dr. Brooks, can you tell the court what happened on that afternoon?" Dr. Brooks nodded slowly. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, like someone recounting facts, not reliving trauma. "I was driving home from a work meeting. I was on the main road, about 3 blocks from the intersection where the incident occurred. I noticed a patrol car behind me. The lights came on. I pulled over immediately, as any law-abiding citizen would." She paused, her hands resting still on her lap. "I turned off the engine, rolled down my window, placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen." "Why did you do that?" A sad smile crossed her face. "Because I'm a black woman in America. I've been taught since I was a teenager exactly how to behave during a traffic stop. Hands visible, no sudden movements. Yes, sir. No, sir. Stay alive." A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. "What happened when Officer Prescott approached your vehicle?" "He was aggressive from the first moment. He didn't greet me, didn't explain why he pulled me over. He just said, 'License and registration.'" "Now, did you comply?" "I tried to. I said, 'Officer, my registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for it slowly. Is that okay?'" And his response, Dr. Brooks' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He shouted at me, "Did I say you could move?" Then seconds later, "Get your documents." Then when I moved, "Don't move." She shook her head slowly. There was no way to comply. Every action was wrong. Every answer was wrong. I realized very quickly that this wasn't about a traffic stop. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he had already decided how this encounter would end before he even reached my window." From the defense table, Officer Prescott shifted in his seat, his smirk fading slightly. Lang continued, "What happened after that?" "He ordered me out of the car. I complied. He told me to put my hands on the hood. I complied. It was hot. The metal burned my palms. I didn't complain." She looked directly at the jury. "Then he told me to kneel on the asphalt in the middle of the street on a hot afternoon. The surface was scorching. Did he give you a reason?" "No. He just said, 'Get on your knees, girl. Maybe this will teach you some respect.'" A woman in the gallery gasped. A juror in the front row, a middle-aged black man, closed his eyes briefly. I knelt. The asphalt burned through my pants. I could feel my skin blistering, but I stayed still. "Why didn't you protest? Demand to know your rights?" Dr. Brooks was quiet for a moment. "Because I wanted to survive. In that moment, that was all that mattered. Survive first. Justice later." Lang nodded. "What happened while you were on your knees?" Officer Prescott stood over me. He made a phone call, casual, unhurried. He talked about picking up dinner on his way home. Laughed about something with whoever was on the other end. Her voice remained steady, but something flickered in her eyes. Meanwhile, a woman across the street was recording on her phone. Not to help, to watch. A group of teenagers rode by on bicycles. One of them laughed and shouted something I couldn't hear. A couple walked past with their dog. They looked at me, looked away, and kept walking. She paused. I was on my knees for several minutes. No one said a word. No one asked if I was okay. No one questioned why a woman in business clothes was kneeling on the street in handcuffs. "What were you thinking during those minutes?" Dr. Brooks was silent for a long moment. The courtroom waited. "I was thinking about my daughter. She's a teenager. I was thinking, what would I tell her? How would I explain that her mother was treated like a criminal for driving while black?" She took a slow breath. "And then I started doing what I was trained to do." Lang tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" "I observed. I memorized Officer Prescott's badge number. I noted the timestamp on his body camera. I watched his partner arrive and saw her hesitate, saw the discomfort on her face. I listened to every word he said, logged every detail in my mind. She looked at Prescott for the first time and asked him a question. Am I being detained or am I being arrested? He didn't answer. He just laughed and said, You're being taught a lesson. Something flickered across Prescott's face, the first crack in his armor. Lang glanced at his notes, then back at Dr. Brooks. Dr. Brooks, you mentioned you were driving home from a work meeting. What kind of work do you do? Dr. Brooks paused. Her eyes drifted to her briefcase again. I'm in law. I work in law. Could you be more specific? A faint smile crossed her lips, there and gone in an instant. I'd rather let my credentials speak for themselves at the appropriate time. Prescott's attorney, Brennan, frowned but didn't object. The answer was strange, but not technically evasive. Judge Hayes made a note. Lang nodded, as if expecting this answer. No further questions for now, Your Honor, but we reserve the right to recall Dr. Brooks later in these proceedings. As Dr. Brooks stepped down from the witness stand, she paused briefly beside her briefcase. Her fingers brushed the worn leather, the faded seal. She didn't pick it up. Not yet, but soon. In the days leading up to the trial, Dr. Brooks sat at her desk in her home office late into the night, surrounded by stacks of files, legal pads covered in handwritten notes, and a laptop glowing with dozens of open tabs. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the occasional rustle of paper. On the wall behind her hung 3 framed diplomas from prestigious universities, but those were turned to face the wall that night. She didn't need reminders of who she was. She needed to focus on what she had to do. A soft knock on the door. Mom? Dr. Brooks looked up. Her daughter Riley stood in the doorway, a teenager in pajamas holding 2 cups of tea. You're still awake, baby. So are you. Riley walked in and set 1 cup on the desk. Chamomile. You need to sleep eventually. Dr. Brooks smiled and took the cup. Eventually. Riley lingered, her eyes scanning the files spread across the desk. Photos of Officer Prescott, incident reports, complaint records, witness statements. Is this all about him? The cop who... Yes. Riley was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her. Mom, why don't you just tell them who you are right at the beginning? End it fast. Dr. Brooks set down her tea. She looked at her daughter, so young, so impatient for justice. Because when I reveal who I am, it has to matter. It has to mean something. Timing is everything, sweetheart. But he's lying. Everyone can see he's lying. Why let him keep talking? Dr. Brooks leaned back in her chair. Because every lie he tells is another nail in his coffin. Every exaggeration, every I don't recall, or every smug smile. I want him to feel safe, confident. I want him to believe he's winning. She picked up a file and opened it. And then when he's at his most arrogant, when he thinks he's untouchable, that's when the truth comes out. That's when it hurts the most. Riley considered this. A slow smile spread across her face. That's cold, Mom. That's justice. After Riley went to bed, Dr. Brooks returned to her work. Months of investigation. That's what this desk represented. It had started with anonymous complaints forwarded to her office at the Department of Justice. Multiple reports from the same police precinct. Allegations of racial profiling, excessive force, systematic targeting of Black and Hispanic residents. Her team had been quietly gathering evidence, interviewing victims, analyzing patterns, building a case. And then on that hot afternoon, she had decided to see for herself. She wasn't working that day, not officially. She had simply driven through the neighborhood, watched, observed. She never expected to become part of the investigation. Dr. Brooks opened a thick folder labeled Prescott, Incident History. A documented pattern of cases, people forced to their knees, cuffed, humiliated, and then released without charges. most of them black or Hispanic. All of them had filed complaints. None of the complaints had resulted in any disciplinary action. She turned to another stack, witness statements. Multiple victims had agreed to testify, people willing to stand in front of a courtroom and relive their worst moments. But one name was missing: Jasmine Morales, a young nursing student. Months earlier, Prescott had pulled her over for a broken taillight. He had forced her to kneel on the median. Cars rushed past at high speed. She had knelt there shaking, crying for several minutes. The trauma had broken something inside her. She had dropped out of nursing school, couldn't drive without panic attacks, couldn't sleep without nightmares. When Dr. Brooks's team had contacted her, Jasmine had wanted to testify desperately, but when the day came, she couldn't do it, couldn't face him again. Dr. Brooks had held her hand and told her it was okay, that others would speak for her. But that night, alone in her office, Dr. Brooks had made a decision. This ends now. She opened her briefcase, the same worn leather briefcase she would carry into the courtroom. Inside was her Department of Justice credentials. Her official title: Senior Special Prosecutor, Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice. For months, she had been investigating Prescott's precinct from the outside. Now, she would tear it apart from the inside. She closed the briefcase, ran her fingers over the faded government seal. Not yet, but soon. On a key day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread that today would be different. Today, the evidence would speak. Victor Lang stood before the jury, a remote control in his hand. Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to submit the unedited dash cam and body camera footage from Officer Prescott's patrol vehicle on that afternoon. Judge Hayes nodded. Proceed. The lights dimmed. The large screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life, and for the next several minutes the jury saw exactly what happened. Dr. Brooks' sedan pulling over smoothly, her window rolling down, her hands placed calmly on the steering wheel. Prescott's voice harsh from the first syllable. License and registration now. Dr. Brooks' response soft and measured. Officer, my registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for it slowly. Is that okay? Did I say you could move? Out of the car now. The footage showed everything. Dr. Brooks stepping out slowly, hands visible. Prescott grabbing her arm, spinning her around, shoving her against the hood of her own car. And then the moment everyone had been waiting for. Get on your knees. I haven't done anything. Kneel, girl. Dr. Brooks sinking to the hot asphalt, her face tight with pain, her hands being zip-tied behind her back, and Prescott standing over her, pulling out his phone, making a casual call while a woman knelt in the summer heat. Yeah, I'm thinking tacos tonight. What? No, just dealing with the situation here. Nothing serious. The video ended. The lights came back on. Several jurors looked physically ill. One woman in the back row of the gallery was crying silently. Officer Prescott sat frozen at the defense table, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Lang let the silence hang for a moment. Then he spoke. Your Honor, I'd like to call our first independent witness, Dr. Harlan Reed, forensic video analyst. A small, precise man in his 50s took the stand. He adjusted his glasses and spoke with the careful authority of someone who had testified in hundreds of cases. Dr. Reed, Lang began, you've analyzed the footage we just watched. What were your findings? Several significant discrepancies between Officer Prescott's testimony and the video evidence. Dr. Reed clicked a remote, bringing up a still image. First, Officer Prescott claimed the plaintiff's registration was expired. This frame, taken as he approached the vehicle, clearly shows the registration tag is valid. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Second, Officer Prescott testified that the plaintiff was verbally combative and made threatening gestures. Audio analysis of the footage shows Dr. Brooks' voice never exceeded conversational volume. Officer Prescott's voice, by contrast, was significantly louder on multiple occasions. He clicked another slide. Third, Officer Prescott claimed Dr. Brooks made erratic movements toward the glove compartment. Frame-by-frame analysis shows her hands remained on the steering wheel for the first part of the encounter. When she did move, it was after clearly stating her intention to retrieve her registration. Lang nodded. In your professional opinion, Doctor, does the video evidence support Officer Prescott's account of events? No. It directly contradicts it in multiple material ways. Thank you. No further questions. Brennan's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. The video had said everything. Lang stood again. Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Officer Sofia Ramirez to the stand. A ripple of surprise went through the courtroom. Prescott's own partner, Officer Ramirez, walked to the stand slowly, as if each step required enormous effort. She was younger than Prescott, with tired eyes and a tense jaw. She wouldn't look at her partner as she took the oath. Officer Ramirez, Lang began gently, you arrived as backup on that afternoon. What did you observe when you reached the scene? Ramirez took a deep breath. When I arrived, Dr. Brooks was already on the ground, on her knees. Her hands were secured behind her back. Was she resisting? No. Ramirez's voice was barely above a whisper. She was completely still, completely silent. She was compliant. Did you observe any threatening behavior from Dr. Brooks? No, sir. Any aggressive language? No, sir. Any reason at all for her to be restrained on the ground? Ramirez was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice cracked. No, sir. I did not. Lang paused, letting the answer settle over the courtroom. Officer Ramirez, on the body camera audio, we hear you say, Vance, maybe we should just, before being cut off. What were you going to suggest? Ramirez closed her eyes briefly. I was going to suggest we let her go, that there was no reason to hold her. And what did Officer Prescott say? He said, I've got this. And he told me to secure the perimeter. Officer Ramirez, in your years partnering with Officer Prescott, how many times have you seen him use this compliance procedure? She swallowed hard. Many times. And what did these individuals have in common? Tears welled in Ramirez's eyes. She looked down at her hands. They were mostly people of color, mostly women. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Hayes banged her gavel. Order. Order in the court. Lang waited for silence. Then quietly, he asked his final question. Officer Ramirez, why are you testifying today? You know this could end your career. Ramirez finally looked up. Her eyes found Dr. Brooks across the courtroom. Because I should have said something that day. I should have stopped him. I didn't. A tear rolled down her cheek. I can't change what happened, but I can tell the truth now. And maybe that counts for something. Lang nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. As Ramirez stepped down, Lang called his next witness, Dr. Evelyn Grant, a statistician from a respected university. Her testimony was devastating in its precision. I analyzed Officer Prescott's enforcement records over recent years, dozens of use-of-force incidents. The vast majority involved Black or Hispanic individuals. The demographic composition of his patrol area is majority white. She looked at the jury. The probability of this distribution occurring by chance is extremely low. This represents a statistically significant pattern of discriminatory enforcement. The final witnesses of the day were civilians. Mrs. Gloria Thompson, a retired teacher who had watched from her porch, Tyler Morgan, a young professional who had recorded the incident on his phone, and Carla Morales, Jasmine's aunt, who had walked past with her young son. My boy asked me why that lady was on the ground, Carla said, her voice trembling. I didn't know what to tell him. How do you explain something like that to a child? She looked at Prescott, her eyes burning. How do you explain that the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones hurting us? Prescott stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his face red. But for the first time, Something else flickered in his eyes. Fear. On the next day of the trial, the courtroom was standing room only. Every seat filled. Reporters lined the walls. Camera crews waited outside. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. Officer Prescott sat at the defense table, his confidence visibly shaken, but not yet broken. He had weathered bad days before. He would weather this. His attorney, Richard Brennan, stood for what he hoped would be a turning point. Your Honor, the defense would like to remind the court that the plaintiff, Dr. Brooks, has presented herself as an ordinary citizen, a victim, but she has offered no expert testimony on police procedure, no professional credentials to support her interpretation of events. He gestured dismissively toward Dr. Brooks. She is simply a woman who was inconvenienced by a routine traffic stop and is now seeking a payday. Her emotional testimony, while compelling to some, does not constitute evidence of wrongdoing. Brennan straightened his tie, pleased with himself. The defense maintains that Officer Prescott followed standard protocol and that this lawsuit is nothing more than objection, Your Honor. Victor Lang rose slowly, a thin smile playing at the corner of his lips. Counsel is making assumptions about Dr. Brooks's qualifications without foundation. I'd like to correct the record. Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. Proceed, Mr. Lang. The plaintiff requests permission to recall Dr. Brooks to the stand for the purpose of establishing her credentials. Brennan frowned. Your Honor, this is irregular. I'll allow it. Judge Hayes nodded toward Dr. Brooks. Dr. Brooks, please retake the stand. Dr. Brooks rose from the plaintiff's table. The courtroom fell silent. She walked to the witness stand with the same calm, measured steps as before, but something was different now. There was a weight to her presence, a gravity that hadn't been there before. She sat down, folded her hands, waited. Victor Lang approached, his voice clear and steady. Dr. Brooks, would you please state your full name and credentials for the court? Dr. Brooks looked at the jury, then at Judge Hayes, then finally at Officer Vance Prescott. Their eyes met, and then she spoke. My name is Dr. Lena Brooks. I hold a Juris Doctor from Yale Law School and a Ph.D. in Criminal Justice and Police Accountability from Harvard University. The murmur became a wave. Prescott's face went pale. For over a decade, I have served as Senior Special Prosecutor in the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. Brennan shot to his feet. Sit down, Mr. Brennan. Judge Hayes's voice was ice. Dr. Brooks continued, her voice never rising, never wavering. My office is responsible for investigating civil rights violations by law enforcement officers across the country. We handle cases of excessive force, racial profiling, and systemic abuse of power. She paused, letting the words sink in. For months, my team has been conducting a federal investigation into this police precinct, including Officer Prescott, based on multiple complaints of discriminatory enforcement. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The gallery buzzed with shocked whispers. Judge Hayes banged her gavel. Order! Order in this court! But Dr. Brooks wasn't finished. On that afternoon, I was driving through the area as part of an unofficial observation. I wanted to see firsthand how officers in this precinct interacted with black residents. She looked at Prescott. He was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. I never expected to become a victim myself, but when Officer Prescott forced me to my knees, he didn't just assault a citizen. He handed me evidence. He made himself Exhibit A in his own federal investigation. Dead silence. Dr. Brooks' voice dropped, but every word carried to the farthest corner of the room. Officer Prescott, when you ordered me to kneel, you saw a black woman you thought you could humiliate without consequence. You thought I was powerless. You thought no one would believe me. She leaned forward slightly. You were wrong. Prescott's mouth opened. No sound came out. Dr. Brooks straightened in her seat. You forced me to kneel for several minutes. I will ensure you spend years answering for what you've done. Not just to me, but to every person you've brutalized under the color of law. From the gallery, someone began to clap, then another, then another. Judge Hayes let it continue for a few moments before calling for order. At the defense table, Officer Vance Prescott sat motionless. The hunter had become the prey. The recess had given Prescott's attorney time to desperately strategize. It had given reporters time to flood social media with the bombshell revelation. It had given Officer Vance Prescott time to sit in a small conference room staring at the wall, realizing his world was collapsing. When court resumed, the energy in the room had shifted completely. Judge Hayes addressed the courtroom. Given Dr. Brooks's credentials and her direct involvement in the federal investigation, I'm permitting her to conduct a portion of the cross-examination of Officer Prescott. Mr. Lang will remain co-counsel. Brennan started to object, but one look from the judge silenced him. Dr. Brooks rose from the plaintiff's table. She didn't carry notes. She didn't need them. Months of investigation, dozens of case files, multiple victim interviews. Every detail was etched into her memory. She approached the witness stand where Prescott sat, his earlier smugness replaced by barely concealed panic. Officer Prescott. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. During your earlier testimony, you referred to me as ma'am several times. Very respectful. Prescott nodded cautiously. Yes, ma'am. Interesting. Dr. Brooks tilted her head. Because on that roadside, you called me girl. You told me to kneel where I belong. Prescott's jaw tightened. I don't recall using those exact... The body camera recording confirms it. Would you like me to play it again? Silence. I'll take that as a no. Dr. Brooks clasped her hands behind her back. Let's talk about your compliance procedure. You've used it dozens of times in recent years, correct? If that's what the records show it is, and of those times, you made arrests in only a fraction of the cases. That means most of the people were forced to their knees, handcuffed, and humiliated, then released without any charges. She paused. Most of those people, officer. What was the purpose of forcing them to kneel if not to arrest them? Prescott shifted in his seat. Officer safety. Scene control. Scene control. Dr. Brooks repeated the words slowly. Let's examine that. Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, a retired librarian in her late 60s. You pulled her over for a broken taillight, forced her to kneel on the sidewalk. She has arthritis in both knees. She couldn't walk properly for weeks afterward. Prescott said nothing. Was a woman in her late 60s with arthritis a threat to your safety, officer? Every situation is assessed individually. Tyrell Washington, a teenager and honor student. You stopped him for riding his bicycle in what you called a high-crime area. That high-crime area was blocks from his own home, where he'd lived his entire life. You forced him to kneel on gravel. His mother found blood on his jeans when he came home. Dr. Brooks stepped closer. Was a teenager on a bicycle a threat to your safety? Prescott's face reddened. I don't remember every... You don't remember? That's been your answer to a lot of questions. Dr. Brooks' voice hardened. Let me refresh your memory about someone you should remember. Jasmine Morales, a young nursing student. Months ago, you pulled her over for a broken taillight. You forced her to kneel on the highway median, cars passing at high speed. She knelt there for several minutes crying, begging you to let her stand. You laughed. Dr. Brooks' voice dropped lower. Jasmine Morales was supposed to be here today. She wanted to testify, but she couldn't. Do you know why? Prescott stared at the floor. She has PTSD. She dropped out of nursing school. She can't drive anymore. She can't sleep without nightmares. A young woman with her whole future ahead of her. And you broke her for a broken taillight. Tears were visible in several jurors' eyes. You don't remember her, do you, Officer Prescott? Silence. But she remembers you every night. Every time she closes her eyes. Dr. Brooks turned to face the jury. Dozens of people, most of them black or Hispanic, exposed, not by some outside investigation, but by Officer Prescott's own records, his own body camera, his own words. She looked back at Prescott one final time. You called your procedure maintaining control, but we both know what it really was. It was a punishment, humiliation, a reminder of who holds the power. She leaned in slightly. But power shifts, Officer Prescott. Today, it shifted. Dr. Brooks straightened. No further questions, Your Honor. As she walked back to the plaintiff's table, the courtroom remained utterly silent. Prescott sat frozen in the witness chair, a broken man who had not yet realized the full extent of his destruction. But he would soon. On the final day, closing arguments filled the courtroom with suffocating tension. Every seat was taken. People stood 3 deep against the back wall. Outside, news vans lined the street. Helicopters circled overhead. This was no longer just a trial. It was a reckoning. Richard Brennan rose first for the defense. His voice lacked its earlier confidence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Officer Vance Prescott has served this community for years, putting his life on the line, making difficult decisions in split seconds. He gestured weakly toward his client. Has he made mistakes? Perhaps. But mistakes are not crimes. A traffic stop that became uncomfortable is not a civil rights violation. We ask that you consider the difficulty of police work, the impossible situations officers face daily, and return a verdict that recognizes Officer Prescott's years of service. He sat down. The silence that followed was damning. Victor Lang approached the jury box. Years of service, he repeated softly. That's what the defense wants you to focus on. But I want you to focus on several minutes on hot asphalt, several minutes of humiliation, several minutes that represent not an isolated incident, but a pattern. Dozens of incidents over recent years, exposed by video, exposed by statistics, exposed by his own partner. Lang turned to look at Prescott. Officer Prescott didn't make a mistake. He made a choice to abuse his power, a choice to humiliate, a choice to treat human beings as less than human because he believed there would be no consequences. He faced the jury again. Today, you decide whether he was right. Lang sat down. Judge Hayes turned to Dr. Brooks. Dr. Brooks, as the plaintiff, you may make a personal statement before we proceed to deliberation. Dr. Brooks stood slowly. The courtroom held its breath. She walked to the center of the floor, standing between the jury box and the gallery, between Prescott and the judge. She stood where everyone could see her. Years, she began, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner. For years I've prosecuted cases like this one. I've sat across from victims, broken, traumatized, afraid. I've heard their stories. I've fought for their justice. She paused. But I never truly understood. Not really. Not until that afternoon. Her eyes swept across the jury. When Officer Prescott forced me to my knees, I felt something I'd only read about in case files. The helplessness, the humiliation, the absolute certainty that nothing I said or did would matter, because to him I wasn't a person. I was just another black woman he could control. Her voice remained steady, but the weight of her words was immense. He didn't see my degrees, my career, my years of service to this country's justice system. He saw the color of my skin, and he made his decision. Dr. Brooks turned to look at Prescott directly. But this isn't about me. I had resources. I had knowledge. I had the ability to fight back. What about the people who don't? She turned back to the jury. The retired librarian whose knees still ache, the teenager who flinches now when he sees a police car, the young nursing student who wanted to help people but can barely leave her house. Her voice cracked, almost imperceptibly. They didn't have law degrees. They didn't have federal investigations behind them. They just had their dignity. And Officer Prescott took that from them because he could, because no one stopped him, because for years the system protected him. Dr. Brooks straightened. I'm not asking for vengeance. I'm asking for accountability. I'm asking you to say clearly and unequivocally, that this is not acceptable, that badges do not grant immunity, that power must answer to justice. She took a breath. Dozens of people knelt because of this man. Today, I'm asking you to stand for them. Dr. Brooks returned to her seat. Silence. Then Judge Hayes spoke. The jury will now deliberate. It took several hours. When the jury filed back in, their faces revealed nothing. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, stood with a folded paper in her hands. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Judge Hayes nodded. Please read the verdict. The foreperson unfolded the paper. In the matter of Brooks versus Prescott, on the count of unlawful detention, we find the defendant guilty. A gasp rippled through the gallery. On the count of excessive force, we find the defendant guilty. Prescott's head dropped. On the count of civil rights violation under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Cheers, tears, reporters rushing for the exits. Judge Hayes banged her gavel until order was restored. Officer Prescott, please rise. Prescott stood on shaking legs. This court awards the plaintiff substantial compensatory damages. Additionally, I am formally referring this case to the State Attorney General for criminal prosecution. Dr. Brooks stood. Your Honor, if I may. The judge nodded. That referral won't be necessary. My office has already prepared federal indictments. Officer Prescott will be charged with deprivation of rights under color of law, along with many other officers from his precinct. The courtroom exploded again. 2 federal marshals approached Prescott with handcuffs. Derek Vance Prescott, you are under arrest. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, Dr. Brooks watched in silence. Justice. Finally, months later, the federal courthouse was quiet on that winter morning. But inside the courtroom, history was being made. Officer Vance Prescott stood before a federal judge, handcuffed, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his pristine dress uniform. Vance Anthony Prescott, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of civil rights violations under color of law. This court sentences you to several years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. Prescott said nothing. His shoulders slumped. The man who had once stood over Dr. Lena Brooks with such arrogance couldn't even lift his head. His wife had filed for divorce months earlier. His adult children refused to visit. His name had become synonymous with abuse of power. Several years behind bars would have been merciful compared to what awaited him. The ripple effects spread far beyond one man. Many officers from Prescott's precinct were indicted. Several pleaded guilty. The chief of police resigned in disgrace. The entire department was placed under federal oversight for years, the longest such supervision in state history. New policies were implemented nationwide. Mandatory bias training, independent review boards, automatic upload of body camera footage to external servers, a complete ban on compliance procedures used for intimidation. The Prescott case became required study in police academies across the country, not as an example to follow, but as a warning of what happens when power goes unchecked. Dr. Lena Brooks was promoted to Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, the highest-ranking position in the division's history for a black woman. But titles weren't what mattered to her. What mattered was Jasmine Morales. Months of therapy, months of healing, months of slowly rebuilding what Prescott had destroyed. On a warm spring afternoon, Jasmine walked through the doors of her nursing school. She was behind. She had missed time, but she was back. Dr. Brooks was there to see it. Thank you, Jasmine whispered, hugging her. Thank you for not giving up. You didn't give up, Dr. Brooks replied. I just made sure someone was listening. 1 year after the incident, Dr. Brooks drove through the neighborhood. She stopped at the intersection where it had all happened. The asphalt had been repaved. A small community garden now stood on the corner, and on the wall of the building across the street, a mural had been painted. Bright colors depicting hands of different shades reaching upward toward the word dignity. Dr. Brooks stepped out of her car. She stood on the spot where she had knelt, and she smiled. A year ago, I was on my knees here. Today, justice stands. This story is real. The names have been changed, but the pain and the triumph are real. Every day, people are underestimated, dismissed, humiliated by those who think power makes them untouchable. But power without accountability is borrowed time. If this story moved you, share it. Let someone know that dignity matters, that justice is possible, that the people we overlook might be the ones who change everything. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people who refuse to be broken and the extraordinary justice they achieved. Because sometimes the person they choose to kneel becomes the one who makes them pay.